Assalamu alaikum, Ozayr, mashallah. So we're here at the Pearls of the Qur'an conference, and one of the great benefits for me is meeting amazing people such as you and getting to sit down and having conversations with them. Professor of Architecture at Carleton University, specializing in Ottoman architecture, I believe.
A personal research interest of mine,
I
should say.
So I'm going to pick your heart and mind.
Khair.
And, I've never forgotten the day that Allah blessed me to be traveling in Istanbul with you. And you shared some information about the Fatih Jami. And every time I go there, I just see you. And I tell some of my friends about all the nuances of the Jami, and they're so amazed by me. And I say, oh, no, it's actually Professor Ozayr Saloojee. See, a masjid that I want to speak to you about, a mosque that I want to speak to you about, dear to the hearts of everyone, beloved, and that's the mosque of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. I'm just going to give it to you. Tell me about it.
Allah. It's a beautiful thing to reflect on. When you ask me about this, I try to think about the first time that I saw Masjid al-Nabawi. And it was alhamdulillah the first Hajj that I was able to perform in the company of my brothers, my family, and we spent some time as we did in Madina Munawwara, and then spent some time in Medina. And the experience, subhanAllah, of visiting was just was something completely otherworldly. I remember Mecca as being a place of energy, of amazing energy and expectation and anticipation in a way that I had not thought about or experienced before. But going to Medina was something else entirely. There was a kind of slowness and the sweetness to that place, and
I'm feeling it as you're speaking. I mean,
no, subhanallah, it was completely unexpected. I had no idea what to expect. I mean, intellectually, I had known this place, but experientially, not. And encountering it for the first time was like drinking the clearest, coolest water I could have ever imagined. Seeing the dome from the distance, and experiencing, just walking around it, and seeing all of the abwab, all of the gates.
It's a dream come true.
Yeah, absolutely. And then going inside, and this time blessed to be in the company of Shaykhuna as well, encountering the space of the Rawda, and seeing his noble resting place, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. An unbelievable experience. I think just the completely overwhelming experience of being near to him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, was something that I'll never forget, and something that for me has completely, I'd say, consumed my thinking about the architecture of that building, simply because of that. I did some research when I was a younger student, and as you know, the masjid was very humble in its beginnings. Maybe 35 meters square, an open courtyard, palm columns, just palm leaf roof with mud brick, a completely unprepossessing exterior, but an expansive inner heart. So moving beyond these walls that are actually quite plain, quite unassuming, quite undecorated, and then realizing that the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is like an analog for our hearts. That we as Muslims are a courtyard people, with simple walls, but inshallah with open interior spaces. And that's something that still strikes me about Masjid al-Nabawi, is how expansive it actually is as a building, as a piece of architecture. It has a monumental intimacy about it. I think at last count something like 1.5 million people can pray inside. It has, these newer design elements of the moving domes to actually provide shade. These umbrellas that open up like flowers to protect the worshipper from heat. The thing that strikes me more than anything, as I mentioned, is just his presence, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in the bricks and in the mortar of that building. Even though it's undergone many changes, since it first began. First, by Umar, and then by Uthman, and then by I think there was an Umayyad Khalifa, Abdul Wakil, and then later renovations and later additions, some of which were under the auspices of the Ottoman Empire. I think Sultan Mahmud II, it was during his reign that the dome was added and that the Roda was essentially established.
And what year would we be looking at this point?
So Sultan Mahmud II was the Sultan in Istanbul in the very early 19th century. 1818, 1819, something around there.
So this attachment to the Green Dome is something relatively new.
Relatively new,
right.
Relatively new. And my understanding was that there was a time when the dome was going to be painted a different color or covered in another material, and there was a very strong sense from the Muslims of Medina that it should remain green, and it remains green.
It's this expression of love.
Absolutely.
We love the color green. Why do I find myself attracted to green?
Absolutely. Thinking about the space of the masjid, and where he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, might have walked, where he might have stood, where he might have been in conversation with companions, with families. That is inescapably just a part of the architecture, and that is as a kind of amazing symbol, I think, of what the building is and its experience. SubhanAllah, is remarkable. I learned recently that the word Medina also has the root words tamaddun in it. So it's a space that is meant to civilize. It's a space of civilization, of adab, of akhlaq, of character, and this is an architecture of that character. It's modest. It's unprepossessing.
Really, and so when I enter and I go to give salam to the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alihi, and I enter from Bab al-Salam, I'm seeing this architectural work and this calligraphy on the walls, and that came at what point, and who did that?
That was likely part of the more recent, renovations, I think. And so I think that the renovations that happened sort of almost about 40 years after his passing was actually a fairly extensive series of renovations. It took about 3 years. And then later also expansions under the various Ottoman sultans in particular, which were also tied into expansion projects around the Haram in Mecca. I think a lot of what we see now are more recent additions to to the Masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The gates, as the masjid has expanded, the gates have moved further and further away. But in a way, it's like that. The heart expands. The heart expands, and
it's a really interesting point. And so, from an architectural standpoint, do we see that the masjid of our Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alihi is unique unto its own, or has it served as a blueprint for other building of masajid?
I think certainly the archetype of the masjid has much to draw from, from the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Formally, of course, the idea of an open courtyard or an open space, the incremental kind of addition of spaces on the exterior. I think that the courtyard has roots in this building. I think the larger, more kind of comprehensive meta nature of the masjid as a place of community, as a place of legal affairs, of social affairs, as a place for the mediation of disputes, as essentially the kind of the fullest experience of what a micro version of a city might be is the masjid itself. An example that I like to sort of make between the two, between a project much later and the Masjid Rasulullah is the Green Mosque in Bursa, which just to the south of Istanbul. The Yeşil Jami has in it a space that had a room for the Sultan and his family. It had coves for judges, for the qadis. There were spaces for social engagement on each side.
Central to the community.
Absolutely,
right.
Absolutely. And so I think that there is a kind of lineage, maybe not an immediately formal one, but certainly a kind of an architectural and an urban and a community ethos that actually comes from what Rasulullah did in Medina.
So I'm going to ask you to take me on an adventure. So we started now in Medina, and then I'm going to ask you to take me to Mecca al-Mukarramah and then into Istanbul. So when we enter into to Mecca, excuse me, what do we see there of architecture around the Kaaba?
Subhanallah. Recently, of recent, we see much more. I think trying to be diplomatic.
You can take us back.
Trying to be diplomatic,
right.
As much as possible. But again, just thinking about my first experience in seeing the Kaaba, the Bayt al-Atiq, and what was amazing was seeing it in the expanse of sky. Was seeing that simple, very beautiful cube surrounded by the blue of the Meccan sky. And the Ottoman domes that surrounded it, which were likely the work also of Sinan, Mimar Sinan. And generally speaking, the very low-key architecture and that happened around it. I think about travelogues from the 17th and 18th and 19th centuries, where you have images of what the Haram looked like. It was actually very modest as a thing.
Because it didn't need much. You had the Kaaba.
You don't need much at all.
You have the Kaaba and you have the Messenger of God.
You don't need, you don't need anything really other than that. I mean, alhamdulillah, much has been done to make the experience of the Hujjaj something that is one of comfort and something that is one of ease. And sometimes perhaps that is done to more excess than needs.
So let me ask you, Ozayr, again, architecturally, the Kaaba, has it provided any blueprint for other buildings?
No, the urban development around Mecca is terrifying.
Okay.
It's terrifying to see that. The Abraj al-Bayt Tower, clock tower that was built, which was actually done by the same architect that built the umbrellas, that designed the umbrellas in Medina. Mahmoud Bodorash, who is, I think, a German architect who accepted Islam.
SubhanAllah.
And so I don't know all of the discussions around the development of the Haram and the area around it, but some of it is so extensive, and the kind of, in a way, almost wholesale erasure of some of the fabric of Mecca is very sad. Actually, it's very sad. But alhamdulillah.
No, we want you to continue to get Hajj and Umrah visas. So we're not good.
I'm also thinking about that too. It's like I have to go back.
Is the
right? We have to be careful.
So you can't say, don't worry.
But no, actually, to answer your question, yes, the Kaaba, I think absolutely. And I was saying this a bit earlier to Sidi Salim for the ImanWire. I think that again the masjid of Salim in Edirne, done by Sinan, so Imperial Masjid by Sinan, has very much a kind of ethos that harkens back to actually a much deeper experience of what I think a beautiful Islamic architectural ethic is. And, the muazzin mahfil that you see in many of the Ottoman masajid are often close to the mimbar and connected to a large column. At the Suleymaniya, it's to the kind of to the right as you enter towards the mimbar, the masjid of the Shehzadeh. At the Salimiya, it's not. It's in the very center of a cubic space, and beneath that there's a fountain. And so this is just my thinking. It's not academically, maybe in the way that we think about academics, sort of certified at least. But the idea that you would have underneath the cubic geometry of the Salimiyah, which is in a way an analog of the Kaaba, that there would be a fountain like Zamzam at the base of that, and that it brings forth water. And above that is the platform where the muezzin would stand to give the call to to Salah. He stands beneath the dome, the cosmos, in the very center of the masjid, and creates in essence this amazing kind of Turkish analog of an axis mundi that we see at Mecca, the Bayt al-Atiq, the ancient liberated house above, in the kind of end space around the Kaaba.
Right, this beautiful spiritual symbolism.
Absolutely.
In architecture. I mean, do you feel that that's been lost?
Yeah, I think in some way it has. I was reading recently a travelogue by Evliya Çelebi, the great Ottoman traveler, and he, in one of his books, I think in his first book, he begins with a description of the Sulaymaniyah, and talks about how when Sinan paused the construction to allow the foundation to settle, so that the masjid would be as stable as possible. I think it was Khusraw, the Persian king, who thought that perhaps the state had run out of funds, and sent money and jewels to the Sultan to say, this is to help you complete your your mosque. And in the end, what I read, taken with a grain of salt maybe, some scholars say that Evliya Çelebi was prone a little bit to exaggeration, but there's a story that says, Suleiman al-Kanuni and Sinan, they took those jewels, and after dispersing them to the community as a charity, the remainder was just embedded into the stones of the Sulaymaniyah because it wasn't needed. So the jewels could beautify the masjid in one of the minarets. And so one of the minarets has a local description as the jeweled minaret. And if the light hits it just right, you can see, certain reflections. Yes, absolutely. I think that the kind of deeper sensibility, the kind of, there's a kind of inner dimension of thinking about what space is and how we are in space, how our bodies are in space, and how our hearts are in space, how all of those things become part of the purview of the architect when he or she is thinking about a space of ibadah. I love to think about this, especially in the context of the Salimiyah, because it's a whole space. It's a total unified space. You enter immediately underneath the space of the dome. There's no distance between the door and the space underneath the dome, and so it feels incredibly unified. And it's one thing that Sinan wanted to do, for all of his life, was how to make a transition between different kinds of geometries. The cubic base of the dome itself and the dome, to go from a rectangular to circular geometries is not easy. And to move from one state to another is not easy. It requires effort and careful attention, and the transitions between one and the other, I think, are actually really beautifully resolved there. But the idea that Sinan as an architect might have been familiar with an inner dimension of ibadah, such that the heart of the believer is suspended above the brain in sujood, and that hangs in this unified space of the dome and the cosmos. I think subhanAllah is there's a kind of ethos that doesn't seem to me, at least, to be as present in how we think about our contemporary spaces of worship.
Is that because just modern day architects have given up spiritual expressions, trading it for just functional
or material innovation?
Or exactly right.
Like yeah, I think so. I think that's a large part of it. I think that there is, or there was at least, an attention to craft and to the care of assembly, that a masjid was more than just bricks and mortar and matter. It was something that was a catalyst actually to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as such you had to pay attention to it. It has to be as beautiful as it is possible to be made.
Which is a really interesting point you're bringing up, because I want to ask you, from your travels and from the masajid that you've visited over various Muslim cultures, you've probably seen a lot of beauty in the masajid.
Yeah.
But sometimes, there was this period in the West where we were told to strip all beauty from the mosque. It just needs to be a square box.
Absolutely.
And you come in and that's it.
Absolutely.
Which led to smelly bathrooms and all these other things that I didn't think about at that point. Like when I'm in Turkey, I see people who are Christian, Jewish, maybe they're even atheists or agnostic, coming in and they're in awe
Absolutely.
of these mosques. My hometown in I don't want to use I'm not going to tell the state I'm in. It's very hard pressed for me to take them into my mosque.
Sure.
I invite them into my home and we drink tea.
Yeah. SubhanAllah, the first time I took students abroad, very nice, kind, sweet, Midwestern farm kids.
Right.
Many of them had never been outside the United States. I think some of them didn't have passports.
Sure.
And we went to Istanbul, and it was the first time I had been to Istanbul as well, and so I had to sort of put on a bit of a professorial air to look like I had some credibility. But we spent 3 weeks only in the city, and we visited as many of Sinan's masajid as we could. So the Shehzadeh, the Suleymaniya. We went to Edirne, we went to the Selimiya, we went to the masjid of Mehmet al-Fath. The Sokol Pasha, the Kilich Ali Pasha, all of them. And when we returned, part of what we did was a design studio, and I took them to a local mosque in the state where I was teaching at the time in the United States. And the palpable surprise on the faces and in the expressions of non-Muslim students that like this is the mosque, like this is a mosque. Was actually quite remarkable, to realize that there is that, and of course there are always other concerns regarding how we build here in the United States or in Canada or in Europe. That you had essentially the full kind of involved engagement of the state.
Right.
You
had resources behind you.
Resources.
But we could still do simple things to beautify.
Absolutely. We could prioritize.
Yeah.
We could prioritize certain things. Absolutely.
So Professor Ozayr, if you were to give advice to up and coming architects, what would you say to them?
I think that to know your tradition, because I didn't know that Sinan existed as an architect. And I took courses in architectural history, and I didn't know. I had no idea that this man existed. I had no idea of the work that he was able to produce, to build. It was almost like there was a giant epistemological gap in my education. And I learned all about Western architects and modern architecture, and I didn't know anything really about the incredible, tradition that underpins the beautiful historical arcs that we share. And so I think knowing the tradition, knowing the architects like Sinan, knowing craft, knowing art, paying attention to craft and to art and to letters, beyond the kind of simplistic way of thinking about it, but the idea that there is a kind of absolutely beautiful dimension of a dimension of beauty, I think, in the historical traditions that we have, in the spatial and urban traditions that we have. I've been very fortunate to have traveled to places like Morocco and Egypt and others, and have seen some of the most beautiful examples of masjids and urban spaces and cities and communities. And I think that knowing that history is absolutely essential to kind of recovering a sense of of who we are and how it can inspire us here.
Professor Ozayr Saloojee, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to pick your heart and brain every time I see you about these questions. Thank you for being with us. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.